Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to World This Morning. I'm your host Hajra Satti and it's a fine, pleasant morning in Islamabad. We are experiencing the summer or what I would call the sun in its full glory. But having said so, I was coming across a very interesting post on the social media and I talked about that we are such a generation that we are smiling, but behind a smile lies a sadness. What is exactly that sadness? It is inherent in us, or whether that's because that we have multiple sort of a stressor. What are those stressors that are forcing us to smile, that too in a very melancholic way? Because nowadays you will find that there's so much stress, there's so much pressure, there's so much materialism. People are running, there's I would say an inherent sort of a race. People are running after materialism, they are running after improving their lifestyle, and obviously when you talk about your khwahishat or you talk about your wishes, they never end. It's a never ending race and it keeps on continues, and in the process, consequently you will see that there's a lot of mental illnesses across the world that are on the rise. So be it the anxiety, be it the depression, be it the other type of the personality disorders that we see, what is exactly lies behind that? So in order to dissect the concept of stresses, what exactly stress means and what is exactly, how do you manage that stress, we have someone in the studio who is going to shine some light on the modern day stresses and how to manage the stress, because from younger children till the age of the elder, we will find that a lot of people are under the immense stress. So how can we improve that, and how can we develop a conversation that can talk about the stress management and also the emotional regulation, which is a very important aspect of it, because people have inherited the trauma generation after the generation, and how to unlearn those generational trauma patterns. We are very glad, and I'm very glad that we have been joined by someone who happens to be expert in the field. She is a clinical psychologist. She happens to be Huriya Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum, Huriya, and thank you so much for coming to my show.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Right. So Huriya, please explain to us what exactly are the stresses and how in this modern 21st century, modern age, digital age, the stresses are impacting us as a humans.
All right. I would start off by saying that actually we need to know that there are healthy stressors,
right,
and then there are unhealthy stresses.
Right.
So if you're having an exam and right before that you're anxious and you're stressed out, then that is actually part of life and that is healthy, because that stress is going to fade away when the exam is going to get done. But if the stress is persisting and it's still there even after everything has happened, right, even after the exam has occurred, even after that, if you're stressed out, then that is probably unhealthy stress. So yes, there's a lot of inflation going on in our country. There's a lot of economic difficulties happening, and a lot of financial issues are going on. The political situation is not, very good in our country. So because of that, naturally our country is very exposed to having stress in their lives.
That's true.
So that is what is actually the main cause why our kids, even from the very starting of the age, are experiencing a lot of stress, because the home environment is sort of toxic or even problematic, because there's a lot of stress that is happening at the house, and the environment in the house is also not very healthy. So that is also one reason the stress is, kids are very prone to having stress.
Right. And I think one of the important factor when we talk about the stress management or emotional, that is linked to the emotional regulation and how to regulate our emotions, because in our society, and it's not just in our society, so we have been taught from generation to generation that there are some certain emotions that are demonized a lot. So for example, emotions like fear, emotions like anger, or emotions of crying, they are dehumanized a lot, and we have been taught that these emotions, so crying is something that is considered to be a very weak sort of a pursuit, and one should not engage in that, and we need to be more more stronger in that sense. So I think crying is perfectly normal. It's a human condition and it's an emotion. So if you find the stories and anecdotes from the prophetic era, you will find that there were lots of prophets who used to cry before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they felt humble before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is nothing wrong, there is nothing wrong in crying, right?
Exactly.
So how do you think we can regulate our emotions in a better way so that we are able to regulate or manage our stress?
Actually, emotional regulation is actually one of the main causes why we are unable to get out of stress.
Okay.
Because emotional regulation means that you sit with your emotion, you attend it actually, right? And if you're feeling sad, you do not suppress it.
Right.
And I will talk about boys here, because when boys are brought up, what happens is if they're feeling any sadness, or even if they're crying or if they're hurt, they've been told, don't cry like a girl. And because of that, our men in our society do not express their, emotions even when they grow up and they're in the married life, and then they're suppressing their emotions, and the wife is complaining that why don't you feel
not a
emotion?
manly thing to do.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it is not right, because if God had this thing in him, that in his head, that men are not supposed to cry or not feel the emotions, he would have probably not put it in them, right?
That's true.
So if it is there, that means any human being is supposed to feel those emotions like sadness and cry out loud. And whenever you experience pain, it is very necessary you attend that emotion and you actually let it out.
That's
yes, there's a right way of doing it.
Right.
Because like I would always suggest sitting with yourself for like 5 minutes and asking yourself how you're feeling and asking yourself how the day went and talking about your emotions and giving a little bit of insight, to yourself, that yes, this is how my day went and this is the sort of emotions I went through today, and it's all right if I went through it, and being able to probably say things out loud. All right, and maybe even cry like we are talking. So it's basically very important to regulate your emotions.
Right, and Huria, so we've seen that there are lots of stuck emotions inside us that we are carrying, right? Probably it's a generational trauma, and those are the patterns that we have to unlearn, and that's a very difficult thing because that requires a self-awareness at a very deeper level, and not many people are able to do that, right? And then they are unaware that how those stuck emotions are then manifesting in the form of their physical unwellness, that I would say, and then they are facing those. So how do you think we can identify those generational traumas that we are carrying, right? And the physical symptoms then they manifest in the form of that?
Actually, we all can tell by what the upbringing is. So because of that, we can identify that these are the features that are coming in our child and these are the problems that are being faced. Like for example, if I talk about toxic mother-in-laws, I would say that, they have experienced a toxic mother-in-law and they become one after all. So they keep doing it from, they keep passing the same traits on and on, and it never breaks, and it's like, I went through it, so I'm going to pass it on next as well. So this is something that we've been seeing. So, we have to be the ones who take this decision that because I went through it, I'm going to make sure that nobody else goes through it too. So I'm not going to do the same things that were happening to, me when I was a daughter-in-law. So I will not pass it on. So yes, these things are important, and we have this responsibility that we have to break these, and we have to be able to work on our stressors, and we have to, like, I'll talk about something here, that we have to know that what language we use with ourselves, right? It matters in what language we talk to ourselves. Like for example, if I say I hate liars, what is going to happen is wherever I go, I'm going to look for liars, right? And my mind is going to scan all the liars for me. But the language does everything. So if I change the narrative and I say that I like honest people, wherever I go, I look for honest people. So instead of telling ourselves negative, languages, we need to transform that, change that, because mindset is exactly what is going to create our reality later on. And that is one thing that can help us break those generational traumas. Because if we realize what language we use to ourselves, what we speak to ourselves, what mindset we are carrying, that mindset is going to pass on to our kids, and that is how the generational traumas keeps, coming in and keeps getting passed on.
Right, and I think we need to discuss one of the important thing, and when we talk about the modern day 21st century, unnecessary stresses. So that I think this factor cannot be excluded because it is intertwined and it falls in the intersection of the entire stress management, that is the social media. And what sort of a role does social media plays in producing the modern day stresses or de-stressing or in the first matter? So for example, I do see that there are certain rewards that are traded, or certain traits that are rewarded by the social media. So for example, I do feel that the narcissist traits are rewarded a lot by the social media. So if someone is highly successful in his profession or is doing wonderfully well, so that person is appreciated a lot regardless of the fact that what is he going through in his life, or maybe the generational trauma that he is imbibed in the first place. So Huria, do you believe that social media rewards the narcissistic traits and it propels us to become more self-obsessed with us? So you know, for example, the concept of the beauty filters, right, which we see nowadays, everyone is obsessed with that and everyone is curating a very picture perfect life that is creating further stresses in the first place.
Yes, definitely social media has its pros and cons, and if we have the good side of social media, it increases the exposure and learning as well, but of course there are the bad sides as well. So yes, I agree with you that these filters and this all of a sudden our lives have become so materialistic.
True.
And all of a sudden we are also focused about how we look and how we come across towards people, and actually we might be crying at home, but we just want to look good, or we just want others to feel as if we are having the best life.
That's
right? So yes, that is a very negative side of social media, and that is impacting our mindsets and our mental health to a, I would say, to a large level. And what we can do about this is that we can probably limit the exposure, because the kids are not being checked and they do not know what we can do with it. They're exploring, and we have to basically control the time of exposure that we are giving to our kids. For example, we can do scheduling for them. We can ask them to expose yourself for 2 hours and not for like have it all day, and they're on their mobiles all the time. And yes, we have to probably boost their self-esteem and their self-worth so much that they do not rely on these things in order to get that approval, you know. So if our kids are having enough self-esteem and self-worth, they probably will not look into these things in order to comfort themselves.
Yes, and I think you have brought up a very interesting and important aspect, that is increasing or boosting the self-esteem, right? And obviously when we talk about self-esteem, so we say that parenting is not an easy task, right? It requires a lot of effort, it requires a lot of what do you call it, I mean patrons to learn, and obviously a lot of patrons to unlearn. So when we talk about improving or boosting the self-esteem of a child, especially from a younger age, because we are not being taught parenting, this is something that we feel, oh, it's perfectly natural, it is something that is innate. So how can we improve or boost the self-esteem of a kid as a parent?
All right, I'll say this. Parents believe that if we are providing every materialistic thing to our child, probably we are doing everything. But that is not the case actually. What actually needs to be done is, I would say the foremost or the most important thing when it comes to parenting is that you provide a healthy relationship that they can experience between a father and a mother. So they both need to have that healthy bond with each other. They need to respect each other. They need to be so well bonded with each other.
How do you deal with the tantrums?
All right, so tantrums is something that probably, it's normal to have a few tantrums, right? Because it's your child and they're also learning it from their environment. Plus, there are other kids, like if one kid has a mobile, the other will be like, why don't I have it? My, class fellow has it. So these factors we cannot say that we can control them in the entirety. What we need to focus as parents is that what is under our control and what is not under our control, right? There are some factors you might be able to control. There are some factors where you can, like I said, you can esteem your child's self-esteem and you can boost that, and you can work on their self-worth, and you can make sure that at least they're getting a healthy environment at home, so that when they're exposed to this, I would say cruel sort of a world, they might be able to handle themselves better, right? So even if we talk about tantrums,
so I think that's a wonderful talking point about the tantrums and how to manage that. And after a short break, we are going to continue this conversation. But thank you so much, Huria, for coming here, for enlightening us about the tantrums. And with that, we are heading out to a short break. Don't go anywhere. Good morning. Welcome back, and before going on to the break, we were talking about the tantrums and how to manage the tantrums of the children, and we were talking about the stress management, how to do the stresses, and we also dissected the concept of the stress. So now we are also going to develop the conversation further on how to manage the tantrums of the children, and especially the children who are school going, because nowadays they are so much pressured into achieving the high grades. So what exactly does that mean for every other child? So without any further ado, without monopolizing my conversation further, we are very glad that we have been joined by someone who happens to be also a clinical psychologist, and she's going to talk about how to manage the psychological issues which are prevalent in the school children. So we are very glad that we have been joined by someone who happens to be Samra Salek. Assalamu alaikum, Samra, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thank you so much. Walaikum assalam.
Right, so Samra, when we talk about tantrums, obviously every child, it's very difficult to manage the tantrums as a parent too, because you know, when you are parenting, you're not being taught how to parent, right? It is something which is considered very innate, right? So you learn by experiencing or when you are doing it, right? So how to manage the tantrums, and what does the tantrum signify for a child and for a parent especially?
See, tantrum for a child is something like where we see that child is being a child, right?
Right.
So if we say that tantrum is something that is done intentionally or is purposeful or is meant to disturb or harm or have any sort of a negative connotation, it may not be very right. It is basically that a child is being a child where the child is unable to explain, express or communicate whatever need underlies him or her, right? It can be some sort of an anxiety, it can be some sort of an emotional dysregulation, it can be some sort of a need where the child is hungry, sleepy, wants something or anything like that.
Right, and how do you differentiate between the different needs that you mentioned? So for example, a child might be experiencing some sort of emotional dysregulation, right? Or the child might be having some sort of physical need, emotional need. So how do you identify that? And obviously as a parent, that parenting requires a lot of patience, a lot of effort. And there comes a point, you know, when you're so much exhausted because of the tantrum. So how do you deal with that entire thing and differentiate between what is that particular need and how to manage those tantrums?
See, for a parent, it is important to understand that what exactly is leading to that tantrum and what is the pattern that we follow and what we can note at the back end. For example, if it is simply a pattern where you feel that every time the child does not want to sleep, he or she reacts. So that's a concern. Every time the child is hungry, the child throws a tantrum. Every time he wants a certain kind of attention, certain kind of thing, maybe a permission to get a gadget, maybe something to go to the park. So the parent firstly identifies that, okay, this is when and how and what is the tantrum, what does it look like? Whether it is screaming, it's crying, it's just not cooperating, it's sitting alone back end per and not just responding to the parent. So once the parent has identified, the second step comes down to that, okay, we understand that this is where it comes from. Whether we attend to that problem, we attend to that need, or do we modify the behavior. So the behavior modification comes in. So as you started with saying that it's an innate thing, so yes, it used to be an innate thing. Parenting is something that we have been blessed with as a natural tendency. But the kind of children that we have today and the alpha generation we are dealing with today, we definitely need to acquire some sort of conscious parenting where we exactly know what sort of behavior is coming in, how to modify the behavior, what is the function of behavior. Like if they are doing a certain act, what do we expect and what does the child expect, that whether I'll be provided with that or I would be given due attention or I would just be disregarded of whatever I am asking for.
Right. And also we've seen, especially when we talk about the school going kids or the kids who particularly fall in that category, we've seen that they are under immense pressure to deliver, right? And we see that there's a pressure on them to achieve good grades, because good grades means that they're going to achieve the higher social status. And in doing so, I mean, sometimes it's parents, sometimes as someone in the surrounding, from the environment, from the family member or the colleagues. So they're putting immense pressure on achieving a high grades or good grades, right? And every person, every child is unique, right? So every child has its own set of qualities, has its own sets of skills, or how do they polish that. So for the parents who are putting immense pressure on their kids in terms of achieving the good grades, what do you suggest to them? How do you deal with those parents? Because I mean, parenting also requires counseling, right? Which is, I think, a missing link in our society nowadays.
See, yes, there is a lot of pressure, there is immense pressure, but that has become a need of time as well because of the competitive world that's there, right? So the students, they are very intelligent. We rarely come across people who are unable to do, other than those who have special needs or who have a different operational system. So students are actually very fast paced, very intelligent, very equipped and very exposed as well. So the parent, in all the good intention, wants the child to perform good, right?
True.
And it's very appreciable that today's parent is not the type who wants to go for a medical background or an engineering thing,
yes,
that my child should be a doctor, my child should be an engineer. There's so many fields, and parents are very open to supporting their children in whatever field they want to progress in. So when they talk about that, and when we talk about the children performing as per the expectation of the parents, it is just a conducive environment that we need to provide. So whatever they are doing, okay, let's give them the skill set. Whatever they are doing, they are emotionally stable. Whatever they are feeling, they are communicating that.
True.
Whatever thought pattern they are progressing with, growing with, maturing with, they are able to communicate and channelize all of that.
Right.
So it comes down to somehow identifying and processing the right thought pattern, feeling stable, calm, peaceful inside, and then having a set of behavior patterns which includes the life skills, eating, sleeping at the right time, having a routine, developing the right study skills at the right time, and from there the parent tries to actually acquire the same set of traits so that they are able to deliver and they are able to facilitate their child in an environment where they can perform better.
Right. And so for example, in psychology, so there is immense studies on what numbering that does the child. So if you have more than one children, right, so your elder born and then your younger born and then the middle born, so and obviously as a parent you also need to give or deliver your set of attention to the different kids that you have in your family, right? So how do you suggest, I mean, and because it's a very exhausting task, I mean, parenting is not easy, right? So for the parents who are exhausted because of the parenting, what sort of counseling do you give them so that in order for them to be able to deliver better and better cater to the needs of their kids, I mean, emotional needs, physical needs and whatever?
See, there is always different level of interventions that are offered to the community around. For example, I'll just put it this way, that whenever we have fever, we go for a simple home remedy that okay, it will settle, and then we go for Panadol, and then maybe something like okay, an anti-allergy would do, and if it still persists, we go for antibiotics, and then we go for the doctors, and then we explore what the problem is. Similar to that, every parent should, and I think must try at least to try helping their children at the home level. I, despite being a professional who would like to have more and more clientele in the clinic, I would still encourage the parents to actually work with their children first hand at the first level. Just focusing on the child starts showing significant improvement and progress, not just in academics, but in the general growing of the child, right? From there, if you think that you're providing ample support academically, the child is not performing, okay, why not? Let's seek out to a professional. So at that level, then we go for screening, we go for thorough assessment, which is psychodiagnostic, psychoeducational, neuropsychological evaluations, where we identify the intelligence level, the cognitive reasoning ability, the neurological levels, the anxiety levels, if there is some sort of a disorder that's coming up and it may arise in the coming years, for example, depression, anxiety, OCD, anything. So we initially screen and assess. Based upon that, if the need be and if it's unavoidable, a diagnosis is given. If not, So we do not categorize every child into a diagnostic category,
Right.
and we try helping them with the everyday issues in an everyday manner.
Right.
From there, the therapeutic intervention starts.
Right. And as a psychologist, I'm pretty sure, so someone who deals with the kids, so what are some of the most prevalent issues that you find nowadays in the school going children, I would say, and what sort of diagnosis do you recommend? Obviously it depends upon what sort of the illness or condition do they have, but what are some of the most common ones that you find?
If I put it very simply, children just being unhappy.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they have anything and everything,
Right.
which we would have lacked in our childhood maybe. Access to the best gadgets, the best food, the best comfort, independence, everything. But despite that, they're just not happy.
Right.
And they have a problem not just with the parents, but anything that is happening around. It's a lot of workload. It's a lot of study pressure, academic pressure. It's we are feeling anxious because we will not be able to perform. We are feeling sad. We are depressed because we have nothing to do. We are bored. So the general unhappiness is very prevalent in the youth today,
Right.
and it starts from a very young age.
Right.
And if I go to a clinical level, if I speak about that, so I think emotional instability and lack of tolerance. We are not very tolerant with what the teachers are saying.
And why do you
When-
think where do you think this stems from, the unhappiness and emotional dysregulation? Because nowadays, if I mean, there's a lot of narrative that is being generated on your mental illnesses, and people are dive into how to regulate your emotions. With so much conversation on emotional regulation or dysregulation, or I mean having a good nervous system. Where do you think we lack, and what sort of conversations do you think we need to have more and more so that we can tackle these problems of
I
unhappiness?
think there are two ends to that. One, children have that exposure and they have the knowledge and they are aware of what is happening.
Right.
So we as children never had that.
Right.
We never knew that what anxiety is, what depression is. So we were just slightly disturbed, and we used to go out, play, and come back, and we would be happy again.
True,
So that was one end of that. And the second comes down to that when we see that no matter what they do, the criticism is not handled very well, right?
true.
They're not very comfortable with taking feedback. So some very natural elements that were therapeutic in the initial years, in our times, we lack that. Maybe it might be very astonishing to hear for the audience, but the joint family systems,
Right.
the role of grandparents,
Right.
they made the children tolerant,
Okay,
right?
okay.
Children knew how to speak to an elderly in a slow pace, wait, then do the task, listen to instructions. So the more independent the younger ones are getting, the natural therapeutic elements in our system, we are lacking that.
Right.
We used to go out for parks, people
True.
used to go out for cycling, walk. We lack that because of the security reasons.
That's true. That's very true.
Similarly, the games, the board games used to be Monopoly,
yes.
Ludo,
Yes.
and etc. The name, place, animal thing kind of a game.
Kingstop, yeah.
Yeah,
London
Kingstop and Kish and whatnot.
True.
But now, what are they playing? PUBG, Fortnite, and that's the only source of medium that they interact with.
True, that's very true.
And similarly, there was a family time, there was a family dinner, so the timings were very fixed.
That's true.
Now we lack that as well.
True, true.
It's a simple message that goes in a family group, everyone come down for dinner, so no one gets to visit each other's room. There is very less time given to the family
That's true.
together.
That's
So these are the things I think that the natural therapeutic elements that we have lacked in today's system are increasing the problems, which I believe that the problems persisted earlier as well, but they were healed. Now that they are not healed, so they grow with that, and that leads to intolerance and emotional instability as
And
well.
I think you touched upon a very important point, which is that the more we move away from the nature, the more we see that nature is trying to make its presence felt, right? And it's very conspicuous by its absence. So, for example, like Simra mentioned, she talked about that how the elderly parents or your grandparents would be a natural support system out there. If you have some sort of disagreement with your parents, so you can naturally go there and you will find lots of love invested in them. Obviously, there are own sets of challenges there, but I mean, again, when we talk about the nuclear family system where it's just the mother and the father and the kids out there. So we lack that element out of that. But when you talk about the unhealed wounds that fester in, so let's talk about or delve into the concept of the mother wound or the father wound and how it develops and it's passed on from your father to your son or to your daughters, and how to handle that, because I do see a lot of kids, like you talked about, that they're generally just unhappy. They're not satisfied with what they have, and I think we are running after so much luxuries and wishes, and it's a vicious cycle. It never comes to an end. The more you get, the more you feel that we are emptier and there's a void out there. You need to fulfill that, right? So how to heal the mother wounds and the father wounds, and most probably if you get a father wound or a mother wound, it has come from generation to generation. How to break that generational trauma?
I'll share a simple data. If there are 10 youngsters coming to me, and when you talk about them and talk about their experiences, and remember when we are talking about the experiences, the very innate initial experiences are with the caretakers. And in our society, the caretakers are the mother and the father, with some exception, right? So the initial experiences turn out to be not very pleasant and very nasty, only because of whatever has happened in their dynamic, and it is attached, the string is attached to either the mother or the father. And when we try explaining to them, because explanation or counseling is one domain of therapy, so when we make them go through the imagery procedures or different sort of activities and mental related activities, they say that we never asked for it. We never asked for money, we never asked for food, we never asked, we wanted their time. So would you believe that every 8 out of 10 children, when they grow up, they blame the same parent who has been working day and night to give them that lifestyle, that luxury, so that they are comfortable, they study in good systems, they eat well, they sleep well. Now where does it come from? Because the parent is trying his or her best in all the best intention to help and to make sure that the child is comfortable, and they are comfortable for the life ahead as well. But remember, they have their own baggage they are carrying. They have their parents, their siblings, their competitive society, where they also get to hear that blah 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 colleague's son did this, that colleague is offering that sort of a gadget to their child when they cleared their O levels. So that father is always struggling and trying to give the best to that child. Similarly is the mom. Initially moms were not very were not found to be working, right? Not majority. Now we see that there are a lot of females and they're doing it for the children. They're doing it either financial support or either for the emotional support or the exposure, or they're very career oriented and they're today's moms. So with all the dynamic being changed, it has to be a healthy, conducive family bond that needs to grow over time, so that everyone heals within their respective domains.
And I think subtly you mentioned a very important point between making sure that your kids' emotional needs are met versus their physical needs. So I think there is a race nowadays where parents want their physical needs of their kids to be met. For example, they want their kids to go to best schools, they want their kids to wear best clothes, to eat best of the food, and somewhere down the line, so they might compromise the emotional aspect of that, all right, how their kids need them in terms of their emotionality or their needs are unmet. How do you think as a parents we could tread that fine line between making sure that their emotional needs are also met, while at the same time their physical needs are also met, and also at the same time they are giving care to themselves? Because I think self-care is very much important. It might appear very selfish to talk about self-care, but if you are not feeling well, if you are not healthy, and if you are not delivering 100% or most of your effort or efficiency, so I don't think so you can give away to the society or your kids in that way, right? So how do you tread the fine balance?
Communication is very important in that. When we talk about things, we self-reflect, we heal naturally as well, right? But the communication channel should be in person. The communication channel should not be through WhatsApp conversations, because yes, today's children are very open in sharing and expressing whatever they feel and whatever they want to their parents, unlike older times,
True, true.
right? But the reason is because there is a very clear buffer of the gadget or the WhatsApp or whatever medium they are using, and it is not in person. So start speaking to your children, know about their day, and do not have to sit down with an agenda that, okay, let's work this out. But more than that, in a natural setting, in everyday routine, if the drivers are there, the driver will pick and drop the child to the school.
true.
So if the father is doing, in certain situations where it is possible, they would have a small talk.
Okay.
Similarly, if the parent is spending some time in the evening together, they are definitely sharing something, right? They are not on their phones, not on the TV, not working, not carrying the baggage from the office. Similarly, the moms need to engage their children in activities which include their self-care. Moms going to the salons, why not take the daughter along?
True.
But moms going with the friends and the child being at home and trying to do whatsoever activity, interacting with a friend, connecting on social media, or be it studying or having friends over, the child is unattended.
True.
Right? So communication, and in a system where there is interaction, where people can talk, people can do activities that healthily engage each other and are of mutual benefit.
Right. And I think we also need to touch down upon a very important aspect of the personality or personality disorder, which is called narcissism. And I think in the first segment we also touched upon that. So I think narcissist personality disorder is something that has been talked about a lot, right? And when it develops and starts to fester in a child, how do you think, because once it's developed, it's very difficult to change, and that requires a massive effort, right? So, but if you are seeing the symptoms of NPD in your child, how do you cater to that need so that child does not turn out to be a narcissist?
See, that's a very, very strong term that we may use for a child, because no child would have any sort of narcissistic traits unless there is a pathological trend that's there, and that can be from the teenage years, right?
Right.
So, if we see something like that, we need to introduce any sort of emotional or the empathetic end to that.
Okay.
Narcissism is best curtailed if empathy is introduced in the very initial years, be it by introducing the sense of help to the lower staff, be it try engaging in positions where you are the subordinate and you have seniors trying to tell you what to do, and alongside the ego part.
Okay.
See, narcissism comes in when they see that the father, other than the pathological trend, as just a imitation sort of a trait,
okay.
when the fathers are very loud, egoistic, and unfortunately in a male dominant house, where everyone is given an equal right to express, share, have an equal decision power, narcissism does not breed in that.
Okay.
So, it's not a friendly environment for narcissism to come up.
Right.
But when we say that, oh, you know that you are the son of this, go tell your teacher, how dare she does that? That's where you start breeding narcissism.
Okay.
When you say that, how come your friend did this, did this? How is it that you did not tell him that you come in where your father gives you this, right? Or how dare someone hit my child? How dare my child was taken into account for any ABC act, regardless of the fact that the child was not doing it right. So, that is from where the narcissistic traits start building, and which is why unfortunately the empirical evidence says that the males have a higher score on narcissistic personality disorders as well.
Right, and I think nowadays our society also reward narcissist traits, and especially with the introduction of the social media and the concept of the filters, where very carefully you are curating a personality or a lifestyle that shows that, oh, we are perfect, but that's not the case sometimes. So I think, thank you so much Ms. Imra for coming here, for enlightening us about the issues that are festering nowadays in the kids, especially the psychological aspect of it and how to deal with that. And this is a very important topic, because parenting is not something that is taught to us. So we learn it through the experimentation, and I think the more we talk about it, the more we share our experiences, our ideas, the more enlightenment we get. And with that, we are going to wish a young bird called Jannat Jibrail a very happy birthday. Happy birthday to you, Jannat Jibrail. May you have many, many more, and may you grow up and carry the glow which you are still carrying with yourself, and you're able to illuminate and enlighten the world around you and make this world a better place. So once again, happy birthday to you, Jannat Jibrail. May you have many, many more, and may you be a source of pride to your parents. And with that, we are going to wrap up this segment, and we will bid you farewell until next time. It's a goodbye, Allah Hafiz, and good morning.
And recognize